This month we're going to discuss in our editorial commentary, aka Shane's Rant, about something very near and dear to my heart and also near and dear to the heart of many of my listeners. And that's the future, or lack thereof, of the 2D gaming platform. As you know, if you've not been hiding under a rock the last 5 years, the lifespan and the days are numbered on 2D gaming. In fact, there is only one source of popular gaming, console, handheld, or otherwise, that is prevalent of 2D gaming, and that, of course, is the Game Boy Advance. Now, many of you know my feelings about Nintendo, and I'm not going to get into them yet again, because that would make a boring show if I just kept talking about how much I hate Nintendo. What most of you don't know is why I have such a thing against the Game Boy Advance, providing you take the Nintendo out of it, take away all the Nintendo titles out for it, which, most of them I didn't care for the first time around, when it was on the Super Nintendo. But if I can separate that for just a minute now, and I'd like to be as objective as possible, I'd like to tell you why I don't like the Game Boy Advance as a hardware unit. To me, in growing up with classic gaming and with gaming in general, portable gaming means something different to me than apparently it means to everybody else. Portable gaming means to me, play your portable anytime, anywhere. Now, we all know that's just not possible with the Game Boy Advance. Why? Because they chose not to offer you a backlighted option. Now, I know those of you who are big Game Boy Advance aficionados are going to say, yeah, but it doesn't drain the batteries in 4 hours like my favorite handhelds, the Atari Lynx and the Sega Nomad. I will grant you that the option for backlit or non-backlit would have been nice. Personally, I don't like my choices limited. If I want to burn through a set of batteries in 2 hours because I'd like to be able to see what I play, I'm not getting any younger. If I want to see what I play and burn through my double set of batteries in 2 hours, that should be my choice. I felt by removing the backlit option for the Game Boy Advance, Nintendo was once again telling me what I wanted in a handheld. What I wanted a portable, and it's not so much as important now as it used to be when I was growing up, if I want to sit in my room with all the damn lights off, cuddled under my covers, with the sheets over my head, this is starting to sound really, really bad. If I want to be in the dark and hurt my eyes by playing Road Blasters in the dark, I should be able to do it. I'd like to be able to see what I'm playing. I'm sorry, I don't have direct sunlight to carry around with me. And I first noticed this at E3 a couple years ago when Game Boy Advance was first being released. They had hundreds of these units all over the Nintendo floor. And if you went to any of them, you could see the games really well. And I was thinking, wow, this is all right. And then I found one that the spotlight on the ceiling had been misplaced, and it wasn't pointing directly at the screen. Now I realized why the Nintendo generation are all growing up to wear glasses, because you can't see the damn things. The Game Boy you couldn't see, the Game Boy Color you couldn't see, and the Game Boy Advance you can't see. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if a game, no matter how good a game is, if you can't see it, I shouldn't have to explain where I'm going with that. Now that I've had my little bashing of Game Boy Advance, yes, I know you can get add-on lights. Yes, I know there's even a hack that you can add a backlight. I want to go to the store and buy one and play it, okay? I don't want to hack it. If you carry around an extra light that requires another 2 batteries, you might as well just make the damn thing backlit, okay? Because that's exactly what the Lynx and the Nomad did, okay? Now, for those of you that have Lynx and Nomads, let me tell you a little trick. Get the D-Pack. It's like that big, giant belt clip battery pack that you put D batteries in. I play my Lynx on and off over the course of a year on a single D-Pack. That's not a bad investment. The thing will cost you $10 and it'll cost you about as much for a set of batteries, but you got it all year long. And trust me, when you go through airport security, you're going to have to open it. And then they're going to go, ooh, what's that? And then you turn it on and they see that brilliant flash of color. People are amazed. I had like 3 airport security guys want to buy a Lynx as soon as I went through airport security. There's a little side story for you. But now that I'm done, you know what? I honestly want to tell you why I give props to the Game Boy Advance. Not because it's Nintendo, not because it plays Super Nintendo games, basically. But because it is the last path of 2D gaming left on the planet. And you folks better enjoy the crap out of it while it lasts, because you know what? 3D portable gaming is right around the corner. And then the 2D gaming generation, the 2D gaming genre will come to an end, and it's all over with. And you're going, I hear a bunch of you clapping. Shut up. No, the death of 2D gaming is not a good thing. Do you want to know why? Because almost every single one of your great, quote-quote, great 3D games that you're playing right now is based on a classic 2D game. That's why there's some games still coming out that are halfway originals, because they steal good ideas from the old generation, right? They say there's nothing new under the sun. Why do you think there's nothing new? Because they're ripping off old 2D games. Look at Crazy Taxi. Crazy Taxi owes itself to Space Taxi. Let's be honest. Space Taxi's Crazy Taxi in 2D. You know, there are tons and tons of titles. You know, Grand Theft Auto 3 owes its origins to Grand Theft Auto 1 and 2. Okay? What I'm telling you is, the death of 2D gaming, while everybody in the modern generation, the generation gaming people, are jumping for joy to finally get rid of 2D gaming, I want you to sit and consider something. Okay? Everyone wonders, Shane, why are you such a big fan of 2D gaming? And I'll tell you why. 2D gaming and 3D gaming, if you take away what they look like, if you take away what they sound like, if you take away the era that they represent, okay, let's take this back a level. Let's look at development of games, and this is important, okay, so pay attention. When you look at a 3D title, no matter what it is, take the simplest 3D title on the planet, and I can't even come up with one off the top of my head, but let's take something very simple, okay. Today's standard simple 3D game program requires a certain level of development. You're talking at least one designer, at least 1 to 3 programmers. You're talking about a modeling guy. You're talking about a texture guy. You're talking about a 2D graphics guy. You're talking about a musician, between maybe, say, 1 and 3 musicians to handle the score. A sound effects guy. Maybe he might be one of the musicians. I don't know. You're also going to need a level designer to go in and build levels for you. You're going to need a QA department, right? And a substantial one, but most of them have staff for this stuff, and they also have public beta, okay? So let's look at your standard 3D title. It's not like you can say David Crane's Pitfall anymore. It's not like you can say Paul Norman's Forbidden Forest, you know? I don't understand how that guy got his name singled out on Dungeon Siege, okay? The new game that just came out. I don't know how that guy got his name singled out, because it ain't about one person anymore. It's not even about 2 people or 3 people or a garage full of people that can sit down together and write a game. Any game that gets Generation Gimme's attention is the effort of 10, 15, 20 people. Okay? Now let me tell you how 10, 15, 20 people come to work on a game. Okay? They don't all sit around and send email back and forth and hodgepodge a game together. They work for a development house. Let's say Bullfrog Entertainment. Okay? Now Bullfrog Entertainment, well, they do have some creative license on their own. They are basically ruled by their publisher. Okay? So we got developers, the house they work for, and the publisher that publishes their games. Without any one of these 3, you can't get a title to a console. Okay? You can't get a title into the hands of the masses. Alright? Now, who puts out the cash? The developers don't put out the cash. They're working for bacon bits like the rest of us, okay? Unless you're the Sid Meier, unless you are the Lord British, you're not making a dime as a developer, really. I mean, you're making a wage, okay? You got guys sitting in booths, in cubicles, that are writing games for $16 an hour, $15 an hour, okay? They're like any other job, you know? They get sent a list of requirements, they do the thing to the requirements, and then they go away. I mean, they're no longer part of the equation, okay? They write a game for the house, okay? The house then pitches the game to the publisher, and hope to God that the publisher buys off on it. Or, what mostly happens, is the publishers strong-arm the house into whatever's popular. That's why there's a lack of ingenuity in video games. Publishers have no interest in making good games. Publishers, they're only interested in making money. Okay? That's it. Electronic Arts, publisher, interested in making money. That's it. They don't care if their games are any good, okay? They don't have a rigid standard of test. They're telling Bullfrog what games to make, okay? They're telling the development houses to make John Madden whatever, okay? They're the publisher, and they're dictating, for the most part, what gets put out. What are they going to dictate? What makes them money? What makes them money? Sequels, rehashes, and the sort of games that I'm constantly bitching about on this show, okay? So, now you look at the house. Well, what's the house's interest? Well, the house has got a dual interest. The house has to make money to pay its developers. The house is interested in paying its people, okay? So the house themselves aren't exactly interested in making video games either. They're interested in keeping their people fed and clothed, and they're also, interested in making a name for themselves, because that's who gets the kudos. Sometimes the publisher usually ends up stealing the bigger part of the limelight. You don't hear about Bullfrog, you hear about Electronic Arts, which is too bad because Electronic Arts used to rule back in the old days before they turned into a greedy, money-hungry, plagiarizing, I don't know, I could go into it, but anyway, Electronic Arts used to be cool, now they're not. Let's leave it at that. So the house is interested in keeping their developers fed, which means they have to bend to the will of the publishers. Publishers tell them, you're going to make this. Or, you know what, the game you sent me, too original, nobody's going to play it. You need to base it on the Quake 3 engine. That's how we're going to sell the game. Okay? So the house isn't even interested in making a good game. Now let's go to the developers. How interested in making a great game are the developers? Alright? The developers are getting paid a wage. This is a job for them. Okay? Do you think... I'm sure this happens, folks. And talking to the guys from Gearbox, Gearbox is a different story. They made Half-Life. They can dictate to the publishers, screw you, we're going to release the game when it's ready, and they can get away with it. But for the most part, the house and the developers don't really have that option, folks. The publishers are pretty much pulling the strings. Would you like to get paid? It's out by Christmas, or type your resume. All right? So that's what comes down the pipe. Now, the game developers... How much pride, how much can they care about what they're building? So, what we're talking about here is big business, and that's what it all boils down to. Video games are a big business, and a big business is interested in making money. They happen to turn out a good game, and I'm not saying that every single development house is like this. I'm not saying that every single developer doesn't give a rat's butt about the game they're putting out. There are some people out there that will stay up. I was talking to some guys, and, one guy says, I have to sneak in after hours off the clock to get something into the game that wasn't budgeted in, but the game had to have it. I want to take this guy's shoes off, rub his feet, and kiss them. These are the people that are still trying to maintain some kind of integrity in this big business that we call game development. All right? Now, since we kind of strayed off the topic a little bit, seemingly anyway, I'm giving you a background. Let's go back now to 2D gaming. What I'm so afraid is going to die off. Okay? 2D gaming has almost always been a single-man project, a double-man project. There have been some very huge 2D titles, that were in the interim of closet developer to big business. Now, the closet developer, he's got to eat too, okay? But the closet developer, let's say Paul Norman, often had complete creative license on what he did. If not, at least he sat in on the meetings to decide what was going to be done. The developer working on the next Quake 3 ripoff game, I guarantee you, is not sitting in on the board to decide what game the house is going to make next. The publishers are going to basically say, it sure would be nice, wink wink, if you made a space flight sim based on the Quake 3 engine, wink wink. And the house is going to say, hasn't that been done? And the publisher is going to say, and the house is going to say, I love it. So they go back and they tell the developers, guess what we're going to make? Now, when you get down to the bottom level, does the developer have some say? Maybe. Maybe not. And I guarantee that the 3D developer, the 3D programmer, has a lot less say than the 2D programmer. So why does this matter? Well, it's a difference in what drives what. What drives the 2D programmer, what drives the 3D programmer. Okay? Yes, the 2D programmer wants to eat, but I've interviewed a lot of 2D programmers, folks. Their goal has always been make the most kick-ass game possible, because we know if we make the most kick-ass game possible, the money will follow it. Okay? We know we've got license to do this. You know, hey, you know what? Let's build a game around the failed Starfield that we were going to make for Missile Command that turned out to be totally wrong. Let's take that field and build a game around it. And hence came Demon Attack. There was a different paradigm. There's a different creative level. There's a different development level between 2D games and 3D games. And it's so apparent. You don't even have to look hard for it. You can see love and compassion in 2D games that you almost never see in 3D games. Every now and then you see something. You know, you can almost tell when you play a 3D game when you see something that somebody added later, you know, or off the wall, you know. You can say, wow, you know, I can't believe they let him do that. And chances are they didn't let him do that. He came in and did it on his own time because he wanted a cool game. He wanted something different about the game. The 2D programmers also had the challenge of working in a fixed environment. A Commodore 64 did not give you a lot of playroom. There was no get a GeForce 3 instead of a GeForce 2. There was no put another 64 megs of RAM in. There was no get a better sound card. There was no install a better version of DirectX. It was basically a closed system. That's why console games often tend to have a different feel to them than computer games, than PC games. There's a totally different feel to it. And I know that my audience understands what I'm talking about. The closed system always strives you to make it better and work more miracles than what you could have worked if you had the option to expand your system requirements. You know? That's a challenge. And the problem is challenge takes time. Time does not fit into a publisher's window. If it ain't out by Christmas, we're going to miss the window. If it's not out by Thanksgiving, we're going to miss the window. If it's not out before summer, we're going to miss the window. Okay? That's what they worry about. They worry about windows. The poor 2D programmer's like, oh, damn it, how in the hell am I going to squeak another K out of that so that I can add this extra guy? I mean, that's what the 2D guy is worried about. You know? So he's always trying to make his code tighter, better, and faster so he gets more crap done in less amount of time. You know, that's the mindset of the 2D programmer. That's the world that I come from. That's what I developed for is 2D. I work to try to strive to make my games run on the most small system requirements as I can. I've gone back and rewritten whole blocks of code. I've gone back and optimized routines. I've gone back and resampled my sprites and my graphics down so that I could fit just a little bit more, so that I could make the P2 450 less than 5 megabyte cutoff that all of us shareware authors struggle to make. And to me, there can't be any harm in going back and trying to make a product better. And I believe that the 2D product line, the whole 2D paradigm, was driven for the idea of more for less. You know, in the 3D paradigm, what you see is, God, I can't wait until the next generation console comes out so we can do this game. Or, you know, I figure that the GeForce 3 will be widespread by now, so we can go ahead and target our game to use that. You know, and to me, the whole paradigm of 2D gaming is so close to extinction. What's going to happen? There's not going to be any cool 2D gaming to draw off of soon. The Game Boy Advance is it, folks. I guarantee you. Nintendo ain't making another handheld. They're probably not going to make another console. That's a topic for a whole nother debate. They already have cell phones with 3D chips in them to play 3D media inside of the cell phone. I guarantee you that the first 3D handheld will completely remove 2D gaming from the mixture. Okay? My hats go off to Game Boy Advance developers. There are developers out there busting their ass. Because why? Because the Game Boy Advance is a closed system. They're busting their ass to make some of the best titles they can, using the architecture that they have access to. Some of the great classics are being ported. Defender of the Crown and Dragon's Lair and Three Stooges. A lot of old Amiga games are going to be ported soon to the Game Boy Advance. A lot of the stuff that we grew up with, that we see as the pinnacle games of our time, are being ported to Game Boy Advance. You know, they're getting the Midway Classics. They're getting good emulation. They're getting good emulators. You know, people are learning to develop for it. We're getting homebrew titles that are of really good quality. And as down as I tend to be on Nintendo in general and the Game Boy Advance, you know, I want to thank Nintendo for keeping 2D gaming alive just a little bit longer. You know, if a Game Boy Advance comes out that's pre-backlit, I'll have to have one. Simply because a lot of the titles that I feel were pinnacle to the development of games are being ported over there. You know, I've even thought about developing for Game Boy Advance myself, and that's a scary, scary, scary thought. For me, somebody who's not a real big fan of consoles in general, certainly not Nintendo consoles, certainly not of modern consoles, especially not of handhelds you can't see in the dark, I'm thinking about developing for it. You know, that's a scary, scary thing. That should give some homage to how I feel about the last bastion of 2D gaming that we have out there. Unfortunately, the days are numbered. The Game Boy Advance isn't going to last forever, and 2D development is going to go right out the pooper. And unfortunately, even 2D development on PCs is going out the window. Every now and then you get a classic like Bejeweled or a lot of the PopCap games that are keeping 2D alive via Java web games. This isn't going to last long either, folks. Macromedia Shockwave already has a 3D module. You can play 3D pool on a web page. It's unfortunate. It's sad that the last era of gaming is almost coming to an end. So what I suggest to you folks is, if you love 2D games like I do, if you feel that there is a different mode between 2D and 3D gaming, try to keep it alive. You know, get a Game Boy Advance if you can. Get some games for it. Defender of the Crown, great title. Glad to see it coming back, even if you can't see it. Anyway, that's my feelings about the 2D gaming versus 3D gaming. I'm interested in your opinions. Why don't you write in and let me know. Let us know what you think about the death of 2D gaming. Its inevitability is coming. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear about it. That'll wrap up our rant for the July edition of Retro Gaming Radio. Well, the beauty of it, folks, is we are just over a month away from the Classic Gaming Expo in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I can tell you that we are getting totally stoked about this. Myself and Brian have secured our booth. If you go over to cgexpo.com, check out the exhibitors. You'll see Retro Gaming Radio and X-Arcade there. We're going to be doing a dual station for you this year. We're going to be giving you the opportunity to try out this cool new X-Arcade controller, as well as we're going to have a listening booth set up where you can listen to past shows as well as watch their video equivalents. Those of you who've been begging to see Retro Radio with video, who've wanted to see what Retro Radio could have been like or could be like with video, you get a chance to sit down at the booth, and you don't even have to buy the CDs, but we will have CDs for sale if you'd like to pick up the archive collection, that you can sit down and watch the great classic episodes of Retro Gaming Radio. We're going to have all sorts of different functions going on. We're hoping to have a Robotron contest for an actual free X-Arcade controller going to the winner. We'll also be playing that on Twin Galaxies settings so that your score can be directly added to the Twin Galaxies worldwide records. So anybody who participates will automatically get their name in the world record book. That's a pretty cool thing. We'll submit our scores right to Twin Galaxies, who's going to be there as well. So much cool stuff is going to be at CGE. The webpage is starting to get up to date, and we've got so much cool stuff. Let me just give you some of the highlights of what's going on. First of all, a little guy by the name of David Crane's going to be there. And I'll tell you what, David Crane is going to be the guy to hang with. David Crane, of course. If you don't know David Crane, shame on you. You need to listen to our show more. Was the co-founder of Activision in 1979, and he's responsible for some of the all-time great titles, including the mega worldwide smash. They're still making remakes of it, Pitfall, and with some other cool titles right from their CG Expo webpage. He's also responsible for Decathlon, Fishing Derby, Freeway, Ghostbusters, and a bunch of other stuff. David Crane's going to be the dude. Also showing up there is Steve Cartwright, who was responsible for the great Atari 2600 game Mega Mania, the cool game Barnstorming, a bunch of other titles to his credit. Who else do we got that you guys would probably know about if I named him by name? There's a bunch of other people coming too. A bunch of people from Activision, some people from Electronic Gaming Magazine, Electronic Games Magazine. We also have some very cool. There's some other people in here that's cool. Robert Smith. Apparently, he was the guy that was responsible for some great titles like Dragonfire, which is one of my favorite games. I play that game over and over and over again. Riddle of the Sphinx. Tons of cool titles. He's going to show up. He's going to be there. We're also going to get the guy that produced Yar's Revenge, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and E.T. We can give him a bunch of crap for the E.T. in person, which would be really cool. We'll have to get a soundbite from him, basically, what the hell were you thinking? Can't wait for that one. Who else we got coming here? The guys that created a bunch of the 2600 games like Defender and Rampage, Desert Falcon, Roadrunner. That's Bob Polero. He's going to be there. So we've got some really cool guests that are going to show up. So we definitely don't want to be missing that. There's going to be some really cool people, some good exhibitors there this year too. Digital Press, of course, will be there, and those guys have just tons and tons and tons of video game information. Of course, they have a bi-monthly video game publication. Plus, they produce a collector's guide as well. These guys have been on top of this forever. That'll be really cool to meet those guys again. They were there last year. They're going to give away a full-size arcade machine, compliments of the Las Vegas Pinball Collectors Club. Apparently, they're doing a raffle to benefit the Las Vegas Salvation Army. Well, it'll be cool. I didn't even see that one coming. We're going to have Songbird Productions there, which, by the way, they are still making games for the Atari Lynx and the Atari Jaguar. Those of you who are just totally freaked out about the Jaguar, and those of us that are basically have a Lynx tattooed on our ass, you're going to definitely want to stop by Songbird because they always have cool stuff they're showing off there. Who else is going to be there? Of course, Twin Galaxies, duh. If you don't know who Twin Galaxies is, go to twingalaxies.com and check it out. Walter Day, good friend of the community, good friend of the gaming community. They've been tracking world records for years. They produce a big, thick, basically the Guinness Book of World Records equivalent in video gaming. Those guys have been around supporting us a long time, so definitely drop by their booth too. Of course, there's always keynote speeches where famous people get up and tell you what it was like when they were making games and what they were doing. You don't want to miss out on that. Last year, I just sat entranced by the whole thing. And, of course, there's booths, folks. There are things for you to buy. So bring money. How much money? Well, that depends on you. I could pretty much exhaust any amount of cash that I brought, to be honest with you. In terms of classic Lynx games, classic, they even have NES stuff there last year. Have tons of stuff at a swap meet. That's the other thing, too. They do a trading session where basically you take all your crap in a box and you go sit down in this big room and you wander from place to place and you trade cartridges and see what other people have got. This one guy showed up last year. Totally just amazes me. He brought, I can't even describe how big this box was. We're talking a huge box. Probably 6 foot by 4 foot by 4 feet deep. And inside this box, just sitting there loose, not in plastic or anything, but just like a box of some kid's toys, was basically like every old handheld you can imagine. The old Atari footballs, I don't know where the guy gets them. But I'll tell you what, hopefully you'll have something unique with you because the guy pretty much works on a trade-only basis. I don't know whether he'll be here or not. But, it's just amazing what you can lay your hands on while you're there. Things that you never even thought you never see again are at the Classic Gaming Expo. So we're all set. We're all ready to go. It's going to be very exciting. We're going to be running raffles and competitions and all sorts of little teaser goodies of our own. We're also hoping to unveil some new software there that we're working on. We're so busy these days. Hopefully we'll get some of it completed. You'll get to see some of the new Dark Unicorn production stuff. We'll probably have a beta of Meteor Blaster there for you to play with. And, of course, we're going to have the X Arcade there, and we're going to have that hooked up both to a PC and a Dreamcast so that you can try the thing out yourself and see if you like it. Hopefully, X Arcade is going to send us a few that we can sell right to you so you can walk out of the Classic Gaming Expo with your own X Arcade. So that's a cool thing. And, again, bring money. That's all I can say. If nothing else, bring money. And sign up in advance. Call the Plaza Hotel now. They've got a list of all the contact lists. They got, I think Continental Airlines is running some promotion with them, so you can get cheaper airline tickets. And believe me, it's $60 a night this year instead of $50 for the hotel room at the Plaza. But if you ever stayed at the Plaza before, $60 is still a good deal. And, of course, they're doing that Las Vegas energy conservation fee, which cracks me up. Because of the energy crisis in Nevada, we're going to have to charge you an extra $3 a night for your room. No, not, we're going to turn off half our frickin' lights on the front of the hotel to save money. We're just going to pass that cost right on to you, our customers. Now, I guess I shouldn't talk bad about the Plaza that are hooking us up, but I mean, everybody is doing that crap in Nevada, basically scraping extra cash off you because of power while they're running 50 million slot machines in the casino. I don't know. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's not me. Who knows? Anyway, so Classic Gaming Expo, August this year. The countdown begins the 10th and 11th of August. It's in Las Vegas, Nevada. Trust me, this is where you want to be. If you're listening to this show and you like this show, this is the place you've got to be. This is the fun land. So, Classic Gaming Expo, be there. We're going to be there. Come over, say hi to us. I mean, we want to shake you guys' hands for listening to the show, being part of our experience with Classic Gaming. Classic Gaming Expo, August 10th and 11th, Las Vegas, Nevada, cgexpo.com. As you know, folks, the X Arcade controller is the controller of choice here at Retro Gaming Radio. If you've listened to some of our past shows, you'll know that the X Arcade controller is a durable, well-built, arcade-style controller for your PC. Basically, it's designed for you to play MAME and other emulators just like you played it at the arcade. Durable hap controllers, well-built construction, very similar to the Hot Rod. And what makes this thing shine is that it's fully programmable. In other words, you can program it to any keys you would like on the keyboard. If you'd like to get a more in-depth review on the X Arcade, please listen to one of our earlier shows. In this show, we're going to review the Dreamcast adapter for the X Arcade. I know what you're thinking. How do I use the X Arcade on a Dreamcast? Well, the good folks at X Arcade have actually produced a little plug-in device that will allow you to plug your X Arcade into your Dreamcast. Now, it's just a little tiny converter box with a couple cables sticking out. You simply plug the adapter into the Dreamcast, and the other end goes into the X Arcade. There is no pass-through, so in other words, you can't plug the Dreamcast controller in line with it like you do the keyboard on the PC version of the X Arcade. Now, this is the same controller, folks. This X Arcade controller, you just unplug it from your PC, move it over to the Dreamcast, and plug it in. Basically, as soon as you turn on the Dreamcast, the X Arcade comes alive, and you are now ready to play your favorite Dreamcast game. The controls, of course, feel arcade perfect, and there are plenty of options on the Dreamcast for using a controller such as this. Now understand, of course, this controller is not for every game playable on the Dreamcast, and we went ahead and we looked at a lot of different games, because last time I reviewed a controller adapter, which was the PlayStation controller adapter, the USB adapter for the PC, we had some snags. Seems that some of the fighting games, the latency of the controller was too slow to be able to pull off special moves. So this time I was sure I took a wide range of game types and tried them out with the X Arcade on the Dreamcast. I'm happy to say that when it works extraordinarily well. Now, I know what you're thinking. What do you mean when it works? That doesn't sound very reassuring. Now, first of all, understand the X-Arcade is a direct digital control replacement. There is no method of emulating the analog controller on the X-Arcade. So for games that require the analog control, namely Jet Grind Radio, there's a few other titles, these games are not playable with the X-Arcade. There's no way to cheat or trick it. It just doesn't work. This controller was designed for the shooters, the arcade fighting games, and in some situations, classic gaming packages. But we're going to go into that in a minute. The selection of games that we chose from our meager library was Jedi Power Battles, Soul Calibur, of course, Project Justice, Pro Pinball Trilogy, Zero Gunner 2 Import, Midway Arcade Hits Volume 1 and 2, Spider-Man, Mortal Kombat Gold, and some homebrew titles, namely MAME D, D Coleco, Nestor DC, and Atari 2600 emulator. So we put these all through their paces. In general, the controls were very responsive. They picked up very well. And no problems. We'll go through each title individually, but there were no problems with latency issues. Moves came off smooth, fast, and clean, and you really felt the arcade presence that you didn't feel before when you have to use those, shall we say, unusual Dreamcast controllers. Not that I like the Xbox controller or any of the other ones any better. It's definitely better than the Intellivision controller. But here, let's talk about some of these titles in general, because it's important to know what the limitations are of this controller. First of all, one of the things I've noticed is the Player 1 and Player 2 buttons are mapped to the Player 1 and Player 2 start buttons. Now understand, this is pretty much a direct layout. Pretty much all the buttons and the digital controller are emulated by the X-Arcade. Just like the 1 and 2 player start buttons are actually the 1 and 2 player start buttons on the controllers, it works exactly as you would think it would work. No programming, plug and play, and it goes. What I thought was interesting, though, and this is something that I would have never really thought about, many games, don't pull the second controller at all. Which means that while some games like, say, Midway's Arcade Hits Volume 1 allows you to change the configuration of the controls, it does not recognize the second set of controls as a separate entity. Now that really sucks, and I'll tell you why soon. First of all, the very, very bad news. None of the homebrews work. MAME, the Coleco emulator, Nestor, Atari 2600, they were all dead in the water, folks. While the buttons seemed to work, the controls did not. Now, I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because the interface that the X-Arcade works off of is designed to work at a hardware level, and these homebrews are working at a software level to pull the controls. I don't know. That's not my area of expertise. What I can tell you is if you're buying the Dreamcast adapter to use your X-Arcade on the Dreamcast to play Nestor, 2600 Coleco games, you can pretty much hang it up. Not going to work. So that's kind of the downside. While we're talking about the negatives, I know the first thing that anybody's going to ask me about the Dreamcast adapter. Can I play Robotron on the Dreamcast with the X-Arcade with 2 joysticks? Sadly, the answer is no. Midway's Arcade Hits Volume 1 will only recognize a single controller configuration. While it does seem to receive input from the right-hand side of the control panel, it assumes that it's still the Player 1 controls. The best you can do, that I found, is to either configure a 4-button configuration like you would on the Dreamcast, which really sucks because the buttons aren't laid out in a 4-button layout on the X-Arcade, to allow you to do the up, down, left, right fire bit. The best thing you can do is fire in the direction that you're moving. And anybody that knows Robotron knows that is no way whatsoever to play Robotron. So, if you're looking to play Robotron on your Dreamcast with the X-Arcade, you are sorely out of luck. Sorry about that. But now that's the bad news. We're all done with the bad news now. One of the things that I noticed while I was using the X-Arcade, and this isn't necessarily bad, but journalistically responsible me needs to let you know, there were times when the second controller didn't seem to show up right away. Good example is Midway Arcade Hits Volume 2. My daughter and I were playing Rampage together, and she had already started the game, and I attempted to buy in, basically, so that I could play with her. And, well, all of my buttons worked, the directionals did not. But when we started the game over again and basically started together, it worked fine. Now, I wasn't able to duplicate that, but it's important to know. Something else I noticed is, you know how you can bypass the BIOS startup on the Dreamcast, the little swirly thing? You can hit the start button, it'll skip past the little intro. Sometimes the X-Arcade worked, sometimes it didn't. I mean, it's not a big deal. It didn't affect the games at all. But, you know, it's something worth noting, and, you know, maybe sometime down the road that'll actually mean something important. Now, let's talk about the good stuff. Enough of the bad stuff. Let's talk about the good stuff. The games that were most beneficial from this controller was Mortal Kombat Gold, which, by the way, is a totally different game when you have arcade controllers, folks. It was a joy to play. Even people who may not like Mortal Kombat, certainly playing Mortal Kombat with arcade controllers was the bomb. The same went with Soul Calibur. Very, very different than playing with the controllers. It almost feels like playing a new game, which is way cool. Spider-Man, which was the game that we actually took pictures of, and if we decide to distribute pictures with the archive this month, we've been kicking around some way of giving you guys some visuals, and we just can't agree on anything. But Spider-Man is what we originally tried out, and it feels better. I mean, it's a lot more solid of a game. A lot of people probably played Spider-Man with the analog controller, and of course digital, you don't quite have that finesse, but it does still play very well. We played a lot of Midway Arcade Hits Volume 2 and Volume 1, as long as you were, weren't trying to share the controls over a game. We played Joust. Joust was just a dream to play with the two of us. Understand the controller, none of the home arcade controllers, aside from those real big, my penis is bigger than your controllers, like the Devastator, those ones that like take up 3/4 of your desk. Aside from those, there's really no controller that allows you to have two players sitting right next to each other really comfortable. In other words, you wouldn't want to play with a stranger with bad body odor, let's put it that way. But if you're playing family style, if you're playing with somebody, not a scumbag, then you're going to be okay. You're going to be touchy-touchy a little bit. But we played Joust, we played Rampage, we played a little gauntlet action. Everything ran great in a split two-player environment. Unfortunately, Robotron was just that one thing we couldn't do. The arcade shooters, Zero Gunner 2, fantastic. These games were made for arcade controls, folks, and there's no good controller that comes on a console that's really good designed for good arcade-style shooters like Zero Gunner 2. So highly recommended if that's what you're into. If you're into the Raidens, if you're into the straight shooters, you gotta own one of these controllers and one of these adapters. Here's something that was kind of a disappointment. Pro Pinball Trilogy, because of course the X-Arcade has flippers on either side. Unfortunately, those were not mappable. And while I thought maybe I could map one button on either side of the top panel buttons that I could actually kind of use as flippers, it suffered the same fate as a Robotron did. In other words, the second controller would act like the first controller. So if I pushed the A button for the left flipper on the left-hand side of the controller and I pushed the A button on the right-hand side, they both registered as button A, which means, of course, they didn't work. That was kind of a disappointment in that respect, because I was really hoping to try out a little pinball action, so I guess I got to stick to the PC for that. Jedi Power Battles worked as expected. Very, very nice, very clean, very responsive. Project Justice was like any other fighter with a good arcade controller. Special moves, no problem getting those off. Everything was clean. All in all, I got to tell you, if the PlayStation 2 adapter works as good and the GameCube adapter works as good as the Dreamcast adapter, then you guys are pretty well set. Those of you who use the Dreamcast as a hobby emulation tool, you're not going to get any value whatsoever out of the X Arcade. But for you fighting freaks, for those of you who love Soul Calibur, the Mortal Kombats, the Project Justice, the Marvel vs. Capcom, if you are into the arcade shooters, the Zero Gunner, any of those Raiden-style shooters, absolutely have to have one of these. If you're one of the sort of the platformer type guys, the Jedi Power Battles, the run and jump style games, it'll vary from game to game how much use you get out of the X Arcade, whether it's comfortable or not. And again, understand, games that require the analog control will not work. So plan your purchase carefully. Once again, this has been a segment about the X Arcade Dreamcast adapter that's available from xarcade.com. That's x-arcade.com. It's available. I believe they were wanting $29 for them. A great deal, especially now that the X Arcade's down to $169. For under $2, you not only get an awesome PC controller, but you also get a great arcade controller for your Dreamcast. I'd like to take a moment to talk about an emulator project that is likely to be canned if he doesn't get a little bit more support from the people. And I think that my listeners want exactly what this project is, and I don't think that people are getting to his site, to tell him that they want this stuff. Basically, you guys know what a big fan of the Dreamcast I am, and I believe the Dreamcast holds the future for emulation projects to play on your big screen. Already there's some fantastic stuff. Nestor, DeCalico, the 5200, the 2600 emulators. I mean, there's just tons of great stuff out already. And I believe that the Dreamcast, being that it's basically a wince box, has the potential of emulating just about anything and doing it very well. And one thing that's been sorely missed from the Dreamcast emulation lineup has been a Commodore 64 emulator for the Dreamcast. Now, if you play your cards right, you only have to emulate a couple of keys and be able to load disk images. Basically, emulate loading a disk image or a tape image, right? Making it auto-run, and then simulating a space bar, maybe an escape, or not an escape key, but a run-stop key, maybe an enter key. All right, that's about all you have to emulate. There's plenty of buttons on the Dreamcast controller for that. And then emulate joystick 2 with one button. With that emulation, basically, you'd be set to play like 80% of the games out there. We're talking great games, folks, like Jumpman and Lode Runner and all the great classics. Well, this project called DC64 is apparently not going to happen. The guy is probably getting depressed. There's not enough people saying, hey, we really want a 64 emulator. Basically, what I told this guy is I would reach out to my listeners and say, hey, head over to the website, write this guy, and tell him that you want a Commodore 64 emulator for the Dreamcast, that it would basically make your dreams come true. Because I'll tell you what, folks, it'd make my dreams come true. Nothing would make me more excited than seeing Raid on Bungling Bay on my 36-inch Wega. Okay? Nothing would make me more excited than to play Legacy of the Ancients on my 36-inch Wega. And nothing would make me more happy than to play Commando with fake 5:1 surround. Even better yet, Mission Impossible. I could hear that guy scream in simulated 5.1 Dolby. So, the name of the website, the URL of the website is classicgaming.dcemulation.com. And of course, we'll have a link for you at the bottom. The guy working on it, Nick, is Big Boy. And there's a link right there to contact him. Please go to the site. Please tell him that you want the C64 emulator. Please tell him that you want him to continue work on it. We really need to have that emulator, folks. I think that would be the holy grail emulator to have on the Dreamcast. Even if you don't have a keyboard, if he puts a couple of features in the emulator, we'll be able to play almost anything. I mean, gosh, folks, Space Taxi and Raid over Moscow and Beachhead. I mean, there's just so many great titles that I just die to play on my Dreamcast that would just be totally cool. So please, go over there, drop a line. That is, of course, if you want one. I mean, don't just go over there and say, hey, man, this guy from the radio show sent me over there, man. I mean, if you want to see a C64 emulator, go over there and help the guy out. He's not asking for donations. He's not asking for cash. He's basically, somebody tell me you want this thing. Make me feel like my efforts are being rewarded. Help the guy out. I promised him that I would do what I could to see if I could get enough support to make this emulator happen. So please drop over there. That's classicgaming.dcemulation.com and let the guy know that you're interested. Because I think that would be a shame to see a C64 emulator on the Dreamcast, thrown in the crapper because he doesn't think anybody's interested. I know people are interested. Just a matter of getting people to the site and helping him out. While we're on the topic of emulators, things have been just going crazy, haven't they? With people actually getting commercial games to run, Dreamcast games to run on PC. People have already hacked the Xbox. Now let's not forget Microsoft probably released the specs themselves, just like Sega probably released the specs of their stuff out for the Dreamcast. Because let's face it, folks, as much as you hate to admit it, consoles that you can pirate the media, when you can pirate the games, it sells hardware, folks. And Microsoft can't afford to not be selling hardware. They're already losing like $250 a box on the Xbox, folks. They can't afford to lose any more money on hardware. So the Xbox is hacked. Nintendo came forward saying, we're going to concentrate on making better games, which, by the way, bravo. Somebody buy Nintendo a drink, if that's really the case. I think it's a smokescreen myself, but they're just afraid of Microsoft. Somebody should buy Nintendo a drink because to come up and say, you know what, screw it, we're going to work on making better games instead of making hardware that ends up basically sucking anyway. Editorial commentary. I applaud that. I think that's totally cool that they did that. And Nintendo didn't have to. Nintendo's still making money. Nintendo's still a player. They don't have to do this. They're doing it because they want to, or they're afraid. One of the two. I'm not going to speculate which one. But in any event, Nintendo giving up the goods, that's crazy. That's totally crazy. Microsoft losing money left and right. It's being hacked. The games are getting pirated for it. That basically means they've got a year left to live. So they're going to have to come out with an Xbox 2. The PlayStation 2 is still selling strong. I can't figure out why. I mean, I'm sorry. Gary, if you're listening to the show, I don't get it. I still see PlayStation 2 commercials and think they're games for the PlayStation 1 because they look like crap. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But no, I'm not buying a PlayStation 2 for Silent Hill 2. I've already resigned myself. I'm not buying a console for one game. Not going to happen. So it's getting crazy, isn't it? It's getting crazy. They've got a commercial game running on a Dreamcast emulator. Everything is just being picked apart. It's like the apocalypse, the Armageddon going on. And there's going to be an outcome to all of this. Something is going to snap. It's not going to be a video game crash like in the 80s, but something weird's going to happen. And hope to God it's not Microsoft owning the earth because they already own enough of it now. They don't need the console market too. Something's coming to a head. And anybody that's in the field of classic gaming or gaming in general that reports on it and that analyzes it like I do, you can tell that there's a head coming, that something's going to pop, and there's going to be casualties. And I'm not sure who's going to survive or what's going to happen. I really think the Xbox days are numbered. In the beginning, Microsoft had such a clutch going on. The developers were being clutched down on. You couldn't even make a hardware device for Microsoft without buying a $50,000 developer kit and having them, sprinkle holy water on it, ordaining it Microsoft certified. Now, some guy open sourced the box, and Microsoft doesn't seem to care. I mean, you can go get this stuff anywhere. They've got mod chips out for the Xbox now. It's over. It's done. Microsoft made it so that Rick Dyer was afraid to tell us about Dragon's Lair 3D at last year's Classic Gaming Expo. They were showing it to us on a PC, and poor Rick Dyer, he looked like he was ready to crap his pants. Well, I just want to make sure you guys know this isn't the Xbox version you're seeing. This is just the PC version. This is just a PC version. This isn't the Xbox version. And you could tell that, you could almost see the shadow of a Microsoft guy, like right behind him with a knife in his, in his back. You say the wrong thing, I'm going to gut you like a fish, This guy was afraid to say anything, because Microsoft had, basically tormented the crap out of this guy because he was making an Xbox version. And then all of a sudden, now to have all of that crap lifted, to have, Dreamcast emulators springing up. There's going to be homebrew crap out for the Xbox in no time. There's going to be a DirectX wrapper for the Xbox, which is going to basically make it possible for you to play any DirectX game on the Xbox. Basically you're going to slam in a copy of Soldier of Fortune, and poof, you're playing it on the Xbox, PC style. It's coming. And you could see it all coming. And usually that's a demise for a console. Look what happened to poor Dreamcast. Second that puppy got open sourced, everything went to hell in a handbasket. It'll be curious to watch the future. See how emulation works. I'd love to see an Amiga emulator out for the Xbox. If I could get an Amiga emulator out for the Xbox that would play decent, I'd go out and buy an Xbox right now. Just so I could play Orc Attack proper on my big screen TV. That'd be just too cool. But anyway, keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on that. Of course, we'll be covering anything interesting that we hear about in future episodes. Well, folks, it seems that summertime is the time for classic video gaming shows. In addition to the very popular Classic Gaming Expo, which of course we'll be attending in an official manner, there's also a little show that you might have heard of called the California Extreme 2002. Now, this is located in San Jose, California, at the San Jose Convention Center, September 7th and 8th. And basically, for those of you who can't make it to Vegas, this looks like the show for you. Basically, from their website, which is caextreme.org, California Extreme is the classic arcade game show. In a nutshell, it's an annual celebration of coin-operated pinball machines, video games, and other novelties you once found in game arcades. It's 2 days that celebrate this exceptional entertainment medium, featuring tournaments, speakers, parts vendors, and an opportunity to play games you may not have seen in years. All of the games on display are set for free play, so leave your quarters in the ashtray in your car. You're not going to need them. Now, what really makes California Extreme special, I think, this year, that we've kind of got a little secret information. We get a little info passed from our people who gets it from other people, and apparently there's going to be some European MAME developers that are going to be at the California Extreme Show. The game plan right now currently is for my producer Brian and myself to attend this show only as spectators to try to get some interviews with the European MAME development team. Nothing is set in stone just yet, but of course we will keep you in the loop. We'll probably have more information for you on the next show. Once again, that's the California Extreme 2002 Expo. It is in San Jose, California, September 7th and 8th, the San Jose Convention Center. Well, folks, thanks for tuning in to the July 2002 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. I'm Shane R. Monroe, your host, and until next time, keep it retro.